presentation is not focused strictly on the demonstration, but more on the concept of what an application like this will offer. So keep that in mind when you're answering some questions. So I'll start with a bit of history on how the world's been solving problems. Back in 1970, Senator Nelson saw that there were a lot of grassroots environmental things starting up, right? People were driving big cars, the price of oil was going up, but there was no real direction to where things were going. So what he proposed is Earth Day. One day out of the year where students would take time to learn about Earth and recycling environmentalists in their schools, as well as using the day to bring awareness to environmentalism. And that was really the start of the movement. And so as a result of that, there's now 8,000 associations under the Earth Day network. As well, it provides direction, a lot of action, and what we know today as some of the big movements. So my question really to you is, what are the other movements? How are problems solved today? What has the internet really brought us? So let me just start with a free flow of ideas. So if you can think of any companies or associations that people use today, and a show of hands is welcome, or else I'll pick it up. So we have our local Rotary clubs, right, the bigger, the EU, making big steps to unify things. Companies, McDonald's, Toyota, with more than just offering a product, they have social responsibility, they have environmental responsibility. And I'll pick on one person here on tools, because I know Peter Yang mentioned last week that he has a tool set he's trying to build up in things he's learning. So Peter, what would be some tools that you use maybe day to day in how you get things done?
I'm trying to get more information.
So if you go on the internet, or you might use Facebook, you might use your BlackBerry to look up things. There are ways to rate things, you can comment on web pages, but it's very disjointed, right? There's not really anything holding it together. As well, your notes, coming out of your MBA, you'll have a stack of skills in tool set, but are you really able to apply it to solutions in the business world and the greater scheme of things? So my question is, what's the connection between all of this? And if there is one, how would it work? So I'd like to present by starting with an example. We all know the Gulf oil spill. What we're seeing is there's an impact beyond the corporate walls. There's an impact to long-term impact to the wildlife, the environment. How do you hold someone accountable? BP Global is great at numbers. They're still their stock price, their amount of oil they're pumping, but yet they're not able to tell us how much is coming from their one well. They're keeping that a secret. What's the government's responsibility? What's our responsibility? I'm sure each of us would have a lot of ideas in, well, you know, if they actually prepared the oil before it came to the shore, we could actually do something. And you'll also have questions, well, where are the discussions for solutions happening? And what can we leverage some of the past solutions that have been solved to discover or help some of these disasters? And going forward, use it as a template to solve problems like this in the future. So I'd like to present to you Panamantis. It's a web application that models how the way the world can work. So a bit of fluffy words, but it's a collaborative index of problems and solutions. So connecting the big world movements to the small actions that each of us can take by recommending tools, giving us templates, for instance, a disaster model, how to approach a disaster, models of how, for instance, the business world works, and then the connections between each of this. So it's probably best if I take you to the site and just give you a quick example. So here's the quick site, and it's in an alpha stage, and what it does is similar to Google. It would let you search for an item, but instead of you looking for web pages, you're looking for problems and solutions, and then you're more able to connect to that. So it goes with the premise that solutions to our problems already exist. It's just a matter of connecting them, and it's more than just a social network where you're connecting people. You're connecting concepts, ideas, companies, solutions. Take, for instance, it was a great segue, Sadar, right? That's a great example of getting information on a company. But what's the company actually doing? If you go to their website, do they have a feedback link that you can click? If they don't, then they're not really listening to consumers. And that's where the power of the internet and consumers are going. So if I do a little demonstration, Global, I would like to change Global. And so doing a search for BP Global gives you the top 6 monopolies that control the oil industry. Highlighting BP Global as the result. And just to interpret what this feedback is, or what these bubbles, you can view the results in different ways. A hierarchy, a timeline of events, a value chain of how it works. But for now, we'll stick with the hierarchy of, well, here's the company. Down below are the projects that they're working on. So for instance, there's oil production, solar initiatives. So in the events under BP, we're seeing that there's activity on one of the nodes, and that has to do with the current Gulf oil spill. It has a lot of news alerts, a lot of discussion on the internet, which the smart algorithm picked up. Clicking on that, we're able to drill down a little more. And again, we're presented with the same hierarchy, right? Starting from the big movements, the big stakeholders being the government and the environment, through some of the projects that are happening, some of the events and tasks that have been assigned. And if you think of this, probably the best way to think is a glacier as it moves down the hill, right? You have your big ice on top. Down below, you have all the little tasks turning, but in the end, things are happening. So what this website does is point you to that direction. One of the questions I get a lot is, what exactly is this? I guess you could call it a pod. So whether you're a company or you're a task, you have inputs and you have outputs. It's very black box, simple. But you also need a place for feedback, right? Whether you're running a project or when you're doing a simple task, you have status that you need to follow. You have a reputation that you build up, whether it's socially, whether it's individually or at a company level. You also have, like I mentioned before, you have skills and tools that you're using. And you also have an understanding of the world around you and a set of templates that works. So when you're seeing this big glacier type of bubbles, that's what each of these bubbles is. And that's where the power of this web application sits. Because it goes with the premise that before you can collaborate, you need to define what your inputs and outputs are. What are your communication channels? Are you strictly through email? Are you running discussions on forums? Where are these things? So following this example, I won't go through all the details, but after filling in my location as Waterloo, some of my skills and availability, it matched me to 2 potential tasks I can do to help the oil problem. One is for crunching numbers for University of Waterloo, and the other is joining a local meetup group, the net impact, and sharing with their tools and their initiatives that they're using from the grassroots. So other examples, just to be sure I get the point across. Picture University of Laurier not as a school, but not as its own school, but a school object, if that makes sense. So it has its own bubble. It has tools that it can use. For instance, where do people go for carpooling? Where do people buy and sell, right? Craigslist isn't good in Waterloo. Kijiji is. So those types of things to get people using the right tools when they're in their local place. So it's not a social network, and it's not a project management tool. It's used to point people in the right direction. And in doing so, it's expanding that circle of influence and what each individual or company can do or influence through being able to search for problems. And just to close up, to reiterate my points, collaboration starts with an internal definition, and what the application provides is an indexed hierarchy to the problems that are demonstrated, and that really pushes accountability, aligned movements, and leverages lessons learned going from now and into the future. Now, I'm sure I've got some questions. Peter?
If you were going to go onto that site and then give feedback to that BP oil spill, would BP actually get it?